I was quite interested when Gudrun asked me to speak on this issue, maybe because just going to work I create critical incidents sometimes, but hopefully not too many on bypass. I have no disclosures or acknowledgements for any of the equipment companies around any of this. So what is a critical incident? It varies. It's a sort of dramatic event. It may or may not affect patient care, okay, because they can be ones which occur where there's no patient harm occurring to them. But quite often they are very dramatic for us as clinicians, particularly in the environment we now tend to all work in. And it may affect you as a clinician almost as much as your patient, in the fact that it may make you think about your own beliefs, your own education, quite how you did things, quite how you managed that event, and why it actually occurred. And that's a reflective process, and it's not a bad thing to go through. And hopefully you can then avoid making these mistakes or errors again that lead to these mistakes. And I'll give you some examples of some errors that have occurred in some centres which have been repeated. A clinical adverse event on bypass, most of the time for us, is unanticipated. We all anaesthetise our patients, we get them ready for bypass, they go on to bypass, it's sort of something that we just do, and we don't really think that there's going to be an issue. But they do sometimes occur, and they may well be related to something that the patient themselves brings to that operating room. It could be something the surgeon, the team, the bypass, the perfusionists don't work. And it's usually multifactorial when they occur. And it usually occurs if it's not something to do with the fact that something is an illness the patient brings along, it's associated with a breakdown in communication. Okay? Because cardiac surgery is a team sport, and things tend to go wrong when we don't communicate with each other clearly and understand what people have done, more importantly sometimes what people haven't done. The timing of it clearly is pre-bypass, the initiation of bypass, and then on bypass. And I always think that there's some vital things in the pre-bypass area. Initiation of bypass is probably a little bit like taking off in an airplane, the most dangerous time. And then there can be some really unpleasant adverse events that occur on bypass. So let's think about the pre-bypass ones. And the first one I'm going to talk about is the great feared one from patients' perspective, and that's stroke. It may be related to many, many issues that the patient brings, but it's probably related to the atherosclerotic burden they have in their aorta. And in this particular image, you can see some calcified and then some soft, non-calcified sessile atheroma. Now, the calcified atheroma is probably easy for the surgeon to feel, and they may change their route or way they manipulate the aorta. They may change where they put a cannula in. They may choose to have a technique which doesn't involve cross-clamping, and they may choose different areas where they put their top ends on. Having said that, manipulation of the aorta itself is not a particularly sensitive route to telling about soft sessile atheroma. They can often feel the hard calcified plaques, but they don't know what's underneath this. And I can remember a case where one of the surgeons I worked with opened up the aorta to do a top end, and this sort of caseous cheese poured out of the aorta, and that's game over. That patient had already had a massive stroke. You know, they went on to have a very, very bad clinical event. But is there anything we can do about this? And we can use transesophageal echo. It gives a good view of the root. It doesn't give a great view of the ascending aorta and the arch. Probably the best tool is epiaortic scanning. Okay? Now, there are a number of small studies out there looking at epiaortic scanning, and if you put transcranial Dopplers on and you look at the embolic load as measured by transcranial Doppler, and you use epiaortic scanning in observational reports, you seem to reduce the embolic load as measured by transcranial Doppler. The real question is, how do we take that event or observation and relate it to clinical outcomes? So having shown that you can measure something, by measuring that, does it change